Cool. So I'm going to talk about content reporting today. As Bernard mentioned, I run a free Slack community for content marketers. We have about 2,700 people in there right now. And there's so much cool stuff going on. There's people chatting about careers, about like how to allocate their budgets, about, how to explain something to their manager, about content strategy, and so many other things. Reporting comes up a lot though. And I feel like reporting sort of sits at this intersection of career development, like on the job skills, super important. It's also one of the key ways to unlock growth for your own content programs. Like if you're able to report effectively, you're able to prove that the work you're doing is valuable. And that's how you get trust and resources to go do more, bigger, better, cooler things also. So we'll be talking about kind of the four components of reporting today, the four N's, just because like content marketer, you sort of have to kind of go with that alliteration when you can find it. So I've organized this kind of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which may feel a little dramatic considering we're talking about content marketing, but I feel like it kind of works. Narrative is the first thing. That's like the oxygen and water of a content marketing report. Narrative is essentially the story you tell about the work that you're doing. And I feel like the word story has maybe negative connotations. Like we're not trying to spin something. It's just, we're trying to explain the full context of the work that we're doing. And that's narrative. Numbers are next. Numbers really equals data, but I needed four N's and not three N's and a D. So that's where numbers comes from. Like obviously data is so important. I think it's less important than narrative, but obviously still very important. The third thing would be names. Names is how we sort of convey the emotional impact that our work has. So when we put names and faces to the work, sort of on the, put names and faces sort of on the folks on the other end who, instead of being users or page views or sessions, they're actual human beings. Like we actually should be reporting on that. That's super important. And then the self-actualization phase of content reporting is nuance. Content is sort of inherently muddy, and reporting on it can be very challenging because it's not usually, at least, as simple as like dollars in, dollars out. And so kind of embracing that nuance and being able to articulate why certain things are hard to figure out, why you believe something to be true, even if you cannot find the exact data point to prove it, or why you believe something is not true, even though the data suggests that it is, et cetera. So we'll go ahead and dive into each of those four things, starting with narrative. This is a quick quote I pulled from a Morgan Housel article. Morgan Housel is an investor and writer. And in this piece, which I would recommend checking out, and that's a link. I don't know if that link works, but it's a link. He says that investing outcomes are driven not just by business results, but by business results within the context of expectations. And in this piece, the example he cites is Apple versus Best Buy. And I don't remember the exact numbers, but Apple reports quarterly earnings of $1 billion, and Best Buy reports quarterly earnings of $100 million. Best Buy's stock goes up more than Apple's does because it has performed better within the context of expectations. Everyone expects Apple to do well. Not everyone was expecting, at least in this situation, Best Buy to do as well. This is the reason that data is not first on that hierarchy of needs. If you're Apple and you just are kind of printing out gigantic numbers every quarter, or you're, in charge of a content operation, just printing out good numbers every quarter, that's fine. But it lacks the context, right? It's like if your expectations are that you're going to grow traffic by a certain amount and you grow up by way more, that's super important. You need to be celebrating that. And the numbers alone don't really tell you that. If you have set a really lofty goal, I like thinking about this from the opposite angle, and you don't quite hit that, like there's context there too that needs to be assessed. That's kind of where we get into like the nuance phase, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. Anyways, results within the context of expectations is like, I'll probably harp on that a little bit more. I apologize also for the wordy slides. I'm not a designer, so a lot of my slides look like this. The narrative you tell has a lot to do with the people that you're working with and that are working on your content, the projects you're working on, and the progress you make on those things, right? And so again, like if you just print out a spreadsheet with a bunch of numbers on it, it doesn't tell anything about the people who are working on it. How are they doing? Did they do a good job? Were you impressed by the work that they did? What about the projects? Are you simply trying to grow top line traffic, or are you working with a sales team to create sales enablement assets, which would actually probably not drive any traffic? And then the progress too, like, are you kind of hitting your deadlines? Are you ahead of pace? Are you under budget? Are you over budget? Are you behind? Like, all of those things kind of play into this contextual story that we need to tell the folks around us. A really key part of this too is that when you craft your own narrative, you can rally people around it. That's super important. And that's like one of the things that a good CMO can do. They can kind of outline a vision for the marketing team to be working on for the next quarter or year or whatever, and then kind of rally everybody around it. That has almost nothing to do with like hard skills. It's a quote unquote soft skill that is really important for folks in leadership positions. So, if you're a content manager or a head of content, you may not necessarily consider yourself in like a leadership or an exec position, but you can act like one. And part of how you do that is you sort of tell this narrative and you get people excited about it, and you get them kind of to help sort of rally around the vision that you're trying to achieve. That is so powerful because people then feel invested in that story and they want to know, well, what happens next. Reports are kind of like episodic content, like you would find on Netflix. Like at the start of every episode of a TV show on Netflix, there's always like that, like 30 seconds of like, here's what happened last time. And you should kind of be doing that thing in your report. And then the episode is like the report. And then there's a kind of like a cliffhanger at the end, and like you stick around to see what happens next. Like that very simple episodic framework can be really powerful as you're submitting and maybe presenting your monthly or quarterly reports. I pulled this quote from my friend Devin Bramhall. She's the CEO at Animals. She wrote this very good article for the Animals blog a few years ago. I think it's called How to Earn a Senior Content Marketing Role. This is interesting because she's now the CEO of Animals. So she's achieved like basically the most senior content marketing role. So her advice is worth listening to. And in this article, which I would recommend checking out, she says the CEO of your company is looking for results. If they see reports full of data, they know you aren't thinking like an exec. If you want to be the boss, you need to learn how to weave numbers into a narrative about your work that touches on impact, lessons learned, and future plans. Now as the CEO of a company like Animals, like a huge part of Devin's job is rallying people around a vision. So I'd recommend for content folks, like whether you have aspirations to become a CMO or a CEO one day, or you just want to run a better content marketing program, kind of internalizing this idea that crafting a narrative and rallying people around the vision that you have for the work is really important. If you do it well, it's going to make your life so much easier. It's going to help unlock support from stakeholders, more budget if you need it, access to agencies or contractors or freelancers or whatever the thing is that you need to kind of like get over the hump so that you can start building a lot of momentum in your content marketing. Here's just a quick example. It's a little hard to just pull like one sentence out of a report, but I think this kind of illustrates it. Also, just as like a quick side note, reports, and we actually do have an example one that we can send around. I believe that a report should be a document, not a presentation or like a PowerPoint and not a spreadsheet. Maybe those things could accompany the report, but I think the report should be written kind of like an article. So you have text and you have images. In this case, the images would be like charts and graphs. So this is like actual sentences that could end up in your report. So the bad example, the blog received 15,600 visits this month compared to 13,100 last month, which is the kind of thing that I've seen in a lot of content marketing reports, but this doesn't really tell me that much. I don't know. Is 15,000 good? Is that bad? Is that better than what we thought? Is it worse? Like, were we supposed to get 150,000 or were we only expecting 1,500? Like, without more context, there's just like, you have no idea. And so in this good example, the bits that I highlighted are the people, the projects, and the progress. And like, those are the things that you kind of wrap around those numbers to make it more interesting, more contextual, and actually more valuable to the person on the other end of this, the reader. So the good example, we added 2,500 new visits to the blog this month. That's 19% increase. Thanks in large part to, whoever on the content team who put together a new guide. And we're on track to hit our goal of 25,000 visits a month by end of year. And we plan to repurpose some of the underperforming posts to help us add visits without creating net new content. there's like so many things going on in here. Like one, we're talking about relative growth. That's super important. I think that content marketers should spend more time focusing on relative growth, that month over month growth, rather than shooting for absolute numbers. The problem with shooting for absolute numbers is that oftentimes they're too lofty. Even if they aren't, let's say you achieve them, then it's like, well, then what? We just go pick another number and spend like a year working towards it, versus if you say, let's shoot for 10% month over month growth. You can actually forecast that out in a spreadsheet, and now you have a very good idea of what you can be expecting and kind of like goals you can be shooting for every month throughout the year, rather than just kind of like having this giant thing that takes a year to work towards. Also, giant goals can be very deflating to teams when you don't hit them. It makes it very difficult to rally people around a vision if you say our goal is 100,000 page views a month and then you hit 15,000 and you're like, how the hell are we going to get to 100,000? Like, it's just so far away. It's actually, instead of being motivating for most folks, it's actually very deflating. So month over month growth, I think, is super important. Highlighting people on your team. I should use like a sample name here, but like actually like calling out people on your team who do good work, like talk about them. What were they working on? How did they do? Are you seeing that person is growing? Like, if people on your team are growing, that actually reflects really well on you. So as you're seeing that, like, call it out, highlight it. It's a really important part of your reporting. And then projects, repurposing underperforming posts. This is like the kind of thing where like, your CMO may just expect that you're just creating new content all the time. But then if you say, actually, we're unlocking traffic by refreshing these old posts that were kind of declining, that's cool for them to see that like you're thinking outside the box a little bit. You're probably saving the company money because it's easier to refresh than to create net new. Anyways, I could go on and on, but you can see that even in just these 2 sentences or 3 sentences, there's a lot of context baked in. Imagine if you extrapolate that out across an entire report. Now you have like something that's actually interesting to read and that the reader walks away from feeling really good about because they have the full context of it. Okay, second thing, numbers or data. Data is so problematic. It's so useful, but so problematic too. We have access to so much of it. And I think that's actually part of the problem. Like, anyone can log into Google Analytics and just like look at numbers. Without that context though, as I've just spent a couple minutes going on about, it's really not all that useful. So I would say, just in general, data is the most useful, or really only useful, when you have that context, when you have very clear and realistic goals, when you have runway to achieve them, when you have an agreed upon methodology for measuring that data, and then you have a content strategy that incentivizes the right work. And I'll just quickly touch on those. Context, I've gone on about, I'll let that one be. The next one is clear, realistic goals, which I alluded to a little bit. It's a realistic goal is the opposite, obviously, of an arbitrary goal. It's not the exact opposite, but they're different things. So like, in my time in animals, just as an example, I got on a lot of sales calls and folks would say, we want to double our traffic, so we're going to hire you. We would say, okay, well, why? Like, if you double your traffic, then what? And as you unpack that, it's like, well, maybe they've come to the conclusion that that's the only way to get more free trial signups. They believe that they've maxed out everything that they can do from a conversion optimization standpoint. So they just want to dump more traffic into it. And if they've truly done that, then maybe that's the good goal. But more often it was like, well, I don't know, it just sounded good, or like, we want to hit 100,000 page views. Like, why? I don't know. It's just like a nice round number. and those are like pretty arbitrary goals. I recommend pretty much anyone. I'm trying to think of exceptions. I can't come up with any right now. I would recommend pretty much anyone sit down and think about what month over month growth would look like for your blog over about a 2-year period, and plug in different numbers. And if you look at 5% month over month growth over the course of 2 years, and you see that number at the end, you're like, that'd be pretty good. Then maybe that's a great goal. Or maybe you look at it and be like, okay, we could do better than that. Like, we're already growing faster than that. So you start thinking about, well, maybe we should shoot for 10 or 15% month over month growth. All of this is also relative to how much traffic you're already getting to. Like, if your blog gets 1,000 visits a month, it's going to be a lot easier to add 20% month over month growth. Whereas like, if your blog is getting 500,000 visits a month, 2% growth is going to be awesome. So sometimes the numbers, the relative number goes down as the absolute number goes up. Anyways, sitting down with your team and talking about those goals is really super important. it's really frustrating when a CMO comes to a content team and says, I need you to double traffic. Like, one, that just lacks context. Two, it's really hard to do. Like, three, what happens when we get there? Like, there's just so many questions there. So like a team should get together and talk about this and probably come up with a few different things. Top line traffic, like probably page views, like talk about that. What could that look like if you hit certain numbers on a month over month basis? But what if you see those numbers going up, but conversions aren't going up? So talk about some conversion goals and how content can support that. Maybe it's MQLs, maybe it's email subscribers. Maybe it's, if you have a more sophisticated setup, maybe it's like influence pipeline or things like that. But sit down with your team, set those realistic goals so you have something meaningful to report on. That way you don't end up just making up stuff to dump in a report every month. Okay, data also only useful if there's enough runway to actually achieve those numbers. This is another like common problem that I see content teams having, is that they shoot for something like a let's double traffic type of goal. And they have 6 months, or there's no timeline set. It's just let's achieve that goal. And then 6 months in, the CMO says, all right, we're changing strategy because this is not working. When maybe, well, this is like a 2-year process. This is not going to happen in 6 months. That actually, I think, boils down to a content reporting problem. Like if you haven't rallied people around the vision and sort of set the expectations for how long this is going to take, what steps you're taking to get there, and the CMO is just saying it's not working, we got to change strategy. I would actually say that's on you. That's on the content marketer. I mean, it'd be nice if your CMO just sort of intuitively understood that and came to you first, but oftentimes that doesn't happen. So data, again, only useful if you have that runway, but it's also your responsibility to give yourself that runway. Another thing is an agreed upon methodology. Terms like users, sessions, visits, views, those terms are often used interchangeably. But if you go into a tool like Google Analytics or Tableau or whatever other tool, you're going to see really different things depending on which one. You're going to see very different numbers depending on which one of those things you're actually looking at. So if one person means visitors and one person means page views, and you go and look at the reports, you're going to see something totally different. And then you're going to be like, well, what? I thought these were different. And then someone might say, oh, we're getting 100,000 visits. And someone else might say, we're getting 100,000 page views. Those are really different, like, especially if your pages per visit are really high. So as you're talking about like, what are our goals? What are we working towards? Sitting down and saying, how are we measuring these things? What exactly do they mean? And if we're going to measure visits versus views, why? And do we need to measure both? I think you'll probably find, like, this has happened to me at multiple jobs. I can think of one kind of funny instance of it at Animals, where we were, my coworker, Ryan, who now runs marketing there, we're using the term top of funnel in completely different ways and didn't even realize it. And that's like, marketing 101 type stuff. So agree on the methodology so that you can measure the right stuff. And then lastly, a content strategy that incentivizes the right work. So imagine you lay out a content strategy that supports the goals that you and your team have sat down and agreed upon, and you have a way to measure them. If that all works nicely, that's a beautiful thing. But often what happens is the content team has goals, they're working towards them. The CMO has like a slightly different idea of what's going on, is sort of pressuring the content team to do something a little bit different. And what ends up happening is the correct work is not incentivized. So like an example of this in practice is, if the content team is working towards growing MQLs, they're going to do work to help them grow MQLs. But if the CMO is expecting top line traffic to grow, and they're sitting there wondering, why isn't traffic growing? Like those two teams are just not going to be on the same page. When everybody's on the same page, you can create a content strategy and measure all the right things to make sure you're incentivizing the right work. So there's a different scenario where you're working towards MQLs. The CMO is thrilled you're working towards MQLs. You put together a strategy and a reporting structure that helps you do those things, and then you celebrate the growth of it, and you get momentum, and everybody's happy. So make sure that the reporting reflects the goals that are set and the expectations of everybody in the room. Just a couple other quick things on data. Data, as I've sort of said multiple times, is sort of useless in the absence of context and understanding. So I would consider your tools, your Tableaus, your Google Analytics, your Visibles, or wherever else you're pulling numbers from, that's your raw material. It's your job to make good decisions based on that data. So part of that is the reporting. One thing that should always go in reporting is your recommendations for what you should do next based on what you've learned so far. Data, obviously very important part of that, but you also have to know when to ignore things, right? And so one trap that a lot of content teams fall into is like, they'll go into Google Analytics and they'll make like a kind of fancy dashboard, and it measures like everything. There's bounce rate, pages per visit, time on page, and all these things. And it's like, it very quickly becomes overwhelming because you're not really sure which of those things is actually important, like, and if the bounce rate's creeping up, somebody might be like, oh, we got to get that bounce rate down. But in the back of your mind, you're thinking, that's just not important right now. Like, we're trying to like grow MQLs or, drive traffic to this guide or whatever. So, being careful to ignore certain data, based on your instincts and your skills and kind of the things you're learning along the way is really super important. Very, very easy to overmeasure. I would actually recommend most content teams don't do any dashboards. Take the handful of numbers that you think are really important and put them in a Google Sheet or an Excel doc. The reason I think that's important is because then it's very easy to ignore stuff because it's not there, because you're only pulling like 3 numbers, and then you can put them in your spreadsheet and you can do your own analysis. So then you can track your month over month growth. You can create your own charts, which you can then download and put in your reports. Like, I think it's really important that content marketers should be really strong with spreadsheets. If you can't analyze your stuff, somebody else will, and then you've totally lost control of what's going on. So that's just kind of a little bit of a side note, but if you want to be better at reporting, which is going to make you better at your job, which is going to sort of set you up for career growth and all these other things, being able to analyze your own numbers is super important, but do it in a spreadsheet because you just have so much more control over it. Gosh, sorry, another wordy slide. I need a designer to help me out. This is kind of just a summary of things I talked about. Agree on the handful of numbers. It's like 3 to 5. You don't need that many numbers to know whether your content's going well if you have clear and realistic goals that you're working towards. Use Google Sheets or Excel as your single source of truth. Pull the stuff, put it there, make it very simple. Look for, I didn't mean to mention this. Look for other data to support your narrative, right? So like, if you have 3 to 5 numbers that are super important and that's really what you're focusing on every month, but you notice there's something else that would be helpful to highlight, doesn't mean it needs a new column in the spreadsheet, but it can be very useful to kind of pluck that number out and then put it in your report, and same deal, wrap it in that context, to explain what's going on here and how it's affecting the work and why it's important and and then lastly, use charts and graphs liberally. Charts and graphs it's very easy for the reader, which in this case may be a single individual, but it's very easy for them to just kind of like hone in on that thing to see what's going on. And I'll show an example of that in a second. This is another reason it's important to be able to use spreadsheets, because you can create your own. You can kind of brand them with the colors, like really make them look nice. But use them liberally as opposed to like gigantic blocks of text or bad slides like this one, where there's nothing to like look at. You know what I mean? Okay, so again, a little hard to kind of like pull tiny examples of this from a larger report, but same bad example. Blog received 15,600 visits this month compared to 13,100 last month, versus a good example, which would be this chart. This chart was pulled. This is like a format, and I can share an example of this too later, a format of a spreadsheet that I use all the time, where I put forecasted numbers, actual numbers together, and then spit out a chart like this, so that the blue columns or the blue bars are the actual traffic, and then the orange is forecasted. So you can always see, based on the forecast that we talked about, agreed upon, this is how we're doing on a month-to-month basis, and this is kind of where we're trending for the year. This graph alone, even without additional context, is so much more helpful than that single sentence. Imagine, 3, 4, 5 of these in a report with paragraph before explaining it, a paragraph after kind of wrapping it up. You can start to imagine like what a really good report looks like. It actually looks a lot like a blog post. But yeah, use these liberally and make them yourself. Okay, the third thing, names. I was first introduced to this concept probably in 2012 or so. I was working for an agency, and we had a big client, and we were running into this issue where like there's just so much data, and like the client wanted to know the data, so we have like 1,000 data points that we export every month and dump in this spreadsheet and blah, blah, blah. And it was just getting to be like so lifeless. And so my boss at the time was like, go on Twitter and just start taking screenshots of what people say about the articles we write. And we started doing that, and the client just loved it, because like now it's not just, so and so, or 100 people read this thing or interacted with this post or whatever. It's like this person with a name and a face, and we could go click through and see their title and where they live and like all you can kind of really start to understand who this person is. Tweeted this, and they really liked it. Like they had a good reaction to it. We started calling that anecdotal reporting, and we started doing that in pulling stuff from Twitter and LinkedIn. Nowadays, I think you can pull it from Slack. There's probably actually a lot of good tools like Mention that would like kind of pull this stuff out for you so that it makes it really easy. My friend Sean Blanda explained to me a great way to sort of handle this. He has a folder on his desktop, which he calls the Art Museum. And he takes screenshots of anything he sees that reflects well upon the work that he and his content team are doing. So that could be a tweet like this screenshot here on the slide, where someone says something really nice about an article. It could also be a screenshot of like a Slack message from the sales team who said, hey, like we used that thing your team put together and it's really helpful in this deal. Screenshot that, maybe somebody like responds to your newsletter. It says like, wow, this article is like really made me think differently about how I do X, screenshot. Like you've got to collect all those little moments because of the names and faces attached to them. And this is how we convey that human emotion, or the human element to it, right? Like if you think about 10 visitors to a blog post, like if you wrote a blog post and it got 10 visitors, like you'd be so disappointed. But if there was like, if you could kind of see 10 actual people that interacted with that piece, you probably wouldn't be so disappointed, because those are like 10 real people that like took the time to read this and kind of, at least in this case, like express some sentiment about it. So include these in your reports. You can have a whole section in the reports of just anecdotal feedback. Probably the best way to think about this for us marketing folks is like, this is your social proof. These are the testimonials for your work, and it's going to mean a lot more coming from somebody else than it is coming from you. I feel like this takes on like a very different importance depending on the type of company that you work at. So like if you work at a company that is massive and the content is getting like, let's say 1 million visits a month to the content, which is like an enormous amount. At that point, the numbers are so big, it's like, it almost doesn't mean anything anymore. Like it's hard. It would be very easy for someone to say, well, why wasn't that 2% better this month? And so like, and I think it's incredibly important, like as the numbers get larger and larger, to lean into this kind of social proof thing a little bit more. So that you can see like, yeah, 1 million people is a lot. Here's one person, like here's just one name and face. It said something nice. Now extrapolate that across 1 million people. Like imagine what 1 million human beings looks like interacting with this thing. And then for like a really small company where you're maybe still figuring out like what exactly is working and what's not, like the numbers may not really tell you. Like if you're just starting a blog, for example, and your first 10 posts are fantastic, but don't get any traffic because you have no way to distribute them. The handful of responses that you do get are going to carry a lot of weight. So capture those things, like build them into your story. And then, like 10 unique visitors, like you're going to put people to sleep, 10 names and faces, super exciting. And then this is a link here to this podcast I did with Sean, where we talked about this art museum concept. So I'd recommend checking out. Also, Sean is just like an incredibly smart content marketer, has a lot of smart things to say about a lot of different things. So I'd recommend checking Sean out too. Okay. An example for this one, bad example. I've actually seen things like this in reports where people say, our LinkedIn post got 150 impressions, which is like the most meaningless statistic in the entire world, because it doesn't even mean they clicked on it. It just means that it like was in their feed at some point, versus a screenshot like this, where this person is saying something really nice about this article. It's really easy to track this kind of stuff. So that makes it like just a no-brainer to go and capture these images. But like this post, the screenshot is like, I guess represents 1/150th of the amount of people as the bad example, but it's 150 times more powerful. Like not exact math, obviously, but like this kind of stuff. Like I'm going to remember that tweet. I'm never going to remember how many people saw our stuff on LinkedIn. So anyways, Take lots of screenshots and put them in your reports. It's going to be really helpful. Okay. And then last thing, nuance. Another wordy slide. Okay. Content marketing, as I said, as we were kind of first getting started, is just inherently complex. It's just never as simple as dollars in and dollars out. I think we should embrace this, right? I think the oversimplification of content marketing actually is just like a drag on the entire industry. And the more we try to simplify it, like the more of a disservice we do to ourselves as content marketers. I'm not suggesting that you kind of like lead every report with like this like kind of like super detailed explanation of like this little thing and that little thing. Like start big, tell the story, but leave a little bit of room for nuance. And I think this is important for a couple of reasons. One is if you're able to highlight, let's say you find a discrepancy in the data, or you see that as one number goes down, another goes up, or one goes up and one goes down. Like as you're able to sort of find those things and then add your own insight and analysis to them, even if it's just a sentence or two, it actually says quite a bit about you. It says that you're paying very close attention and that you're thinking very critically about the work that you and your team are doing. It also can help leadership understand why all numbers don't go up all the time. All right, like a lot of what we talked about so far today is numbers going up and how to capture all that and celebrate it. But that's not what happens, obviously. You know, like a lot of times numbers don't go up, or the wrong number goes up and the wrong number goes down. And so like you have to be able to explain that. It's not, I'm not suggesting that you use nuance as a way to like make excuses for missing goals. What I am saying is embrace it as a way to kind of think through all of the little things that end up making a content program successful. One of those things is good content. One of those things is good reporting. One of those things is rallying folks around the vision. So couple common examples of where I think nuance ends up being really important. These are things I have actually come across in my, not even just client work, but like in my own work. When a surge of traffic, say you get featured in a newsletter and it drives a bunch of new traffic to your site, and your monthly traffic is now like twice what it was the month prior. If you were measuring, you're shooting for 10% month over month growth, you have to now reset all of the forecasting, because just because your traffic doubled in 1 month does not mean you will then be able to add incrementally to that nice high month, right? Like you actually may end up needing to filter that traffic out to get a better understanding of where your site actually is. And so, if you can't use a spreadsheet and you can't do your own analysis and you don't understand how or why you should be filtering out this surge, which could, if you don't handle it correctly, create very unrealistic expectations for the next month, you're kind of out of luck. So, you know, there's kind of like brings together a bunch of different things that we've talked about. This actually happens all the time though. Another example I've seen a number of times is like, okay, a content team is getting, you know, you've sort of gotten the blog to a healthy place, and then you start looking at conversion. So you go to your sales team and say, hey, do you have everything you need from a content perspective to do your work? And they say, you know, actually, we really could use a couple case studies, and, you know, we need this like sales enablement thing and da. So you make a plan, you get your team on board, and you go and create those things. And it takes 2 months. And as you're doing it, your top line traffic is like creeping downward. And somebody probably higher up is like kind of freaking out, saying like, why is traffic, like we just put all this time and money into getting the blog to this point. Why is it creeping down? And if you can't say in your reporting, you know, and also like in meetings with these folks, say like, you know, based on these factors, we made the decision to prioritize conversion because the sales team, you know, needs these assets to close deals faster. And then say later on, you know, we gave them these assets and now they're closing deals at a faster rate, or their time to close is shorter, or, you know, we're hearing like anecdotal feedback that this is working, and we're working on, you know, finding the data points to prove it out, that kind of thing. Like you've got to be able to do that. And then there's flip to this too, where like some teams are really good at repurposing content, and they can increase traffic without creating anything new. And so like if one of the things that, you know, your management is looking at is like, how often are they getting emails about new content, or how often are they seeing new stuff published on the blog, which many of them do. They might also start being like, well, I haven't seen anything. What's going on? If you can point to a chart and say, actually, look, we refreshed this and traffic is going up and we're actually saving a ton of money because we're not creating anything new right now. That's awesome. But you have to be able to articulate that, not just from a content standpoint, but from a business standpoint too. So there's so many different examples of how this actually happens in practice. But being able to like highlight those nuances, capture them, articulate them, analyze them, communicate, that's really going to be helpful in creating good reports around building trust with your managers who read these things. And that's the kind of thing that like I kind of sort of keep harping on, sort of unlocks that momentum and makes it a little easier for you to do the things you believe the company needs. Okay, I think this is my last slide. Bad example. And this is the one I just sort of highlighted. If you just say in your report, our organic traffic declined by 10% last month, everyone's gonna be like, what? What happened? Versus if you say organic traffic fell 10% last month because we prioritize this other thing, which is actually like earning dollars and cents for the company. And that's like creating the sales enablement stuff for the sales team example that I just talked about. Being able to explain that, maybe even being able to pull out like that screenshot from the sales team, say, hey, like, this case study is closing deals. Like, thank you all for creating it. Like, get that, put that in there. Numbers do not go up all the time. Your ability to explain that, not excuse it, but explain it is going to be really helpful. So I think that just about does it. I know that was a lot. I do have a sample report, which we can send around, Bernard. So folks can see like exactly what all this stuff looks like in practice. And if folks have questions, then let's do it.
Wow, that was amazing, Jimmy. I feel like you put a framework behind what I like, bits and pieces of like what I just gravitate towards doing. Like, I feel like the art museum example really like hit home, because we at ClearScope, we screenshot stuff all the time.
Yeah.
We share it to the Slack channel.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Check this out. Yeah. And it was just like, oh, right. Art museum.
Yeah.
That was great. And then also I have like these things that like were coming up while you're talking. I'm like taking notes. It's like, how do you set the right expectations? And then I feel like, your numbers like framework sort of like, okay, get everybody on the same page about, what are the agreed upon numbers and what are we all like striving to do? And so I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. It's answered there. And then same with like unrealistic goal settings by leadership. It's like, okay, back to the numbers framework, right? Like, let's make sure we're all on the same page. And then like the last question I was like niggling with in the back of my head was like how to navigate when things aren't working. And I feel like you kind of touched upon that with Nuance.
Yeah.
It was sort of like, oh, well, maybe we prioritized another initiative. But it's like, okay, in lieu of having, say, something come up that is nuanced because you were working on something else, how would you like navigate, say, like 3 months of like consecutive like flatline traffic, right? And the expected forecast is, now outpacing what your team is delivering. How do you go like answer that or like prove internally that everything's okay? That's like, I think what I'm interested in. And then one thing with Mitangi, yes, the full recording will be sent to everybody who RSVP'd to this.
Yeah, that's such a great point. Everything I talked about today, I kind of frame within this perspective of like, you're nailing it. You just have to explain it right. So, but sometimes it does happen that the strategy is just not working. Or sometimes it's that, like another way this plays out is actually the strategy is quite good, but you need more time. Like I think the thing that actually prevents content marketing success more than anything else is a lack of patience. Like you could just grab a content strategy off the shelf and it's probably going to work pretty well if you give it 18 months. And I mean, obviously it needs to be kind of customized to the business that you work in, but like, content strategy is not rocket science. So there's a couple ways you might address that. Like, you might need to look at your channels. Like if say you're creating great content, but you're really struggling to promote it. Like look at the channels where you're promoting it. Are those channels are they well developed? You know what I mean? If you have a really big email list and it's falling flat on that big email list, like that's different than we have 15 people on our email list, so we're not getting any traffic from email. Same thing with LinkedIn. Like if you've spent a lot of time kind of developing like a good audience on LinkedIn and it's just falling flat, like that's a different problem than we just don't have anyone, right? And so there's things you might do, like you may consider paying to promote that stuff, or you may say like, we got to just like step back and like kind of rethink what we're doing here. But if you've gone 3 months and you're really not seeing at least that anecdotal feedback that the stuff's working, something's wrong. Like you got to take a bigger step back. And so at that point, it's not really about kind of highlighting the nuances and explaining them. It's like kind of rethinking the big picture.
Totally. Well, we have a lot of questions from the wonderful attendees that we have. I'm pass it to Shannon to moderate all of that.
Totally. We're going to start in our Q&A. And thank you again, Jimmy. That was so enlightening. And I have to say, one point that stood out for me is just the idea of giant goals can be defeating. Like you wouldn't sit down to eat your entire Thanksgiving dinner in 3 bites. So why would you look at your traffic in the same idea, like in that way? So I love breaking that digestible down into like something good. Great. All right. So we'll pop into the questions. Our first one actually is just a comment on like, well said, all we need is a couple of numbers that make sense and contributes to goals. And so I think we can all agree that's a great takeaway from this. So we've got that answered. And now our next question is going to be from Irene. And so she says, I totally agree that it's important to have common methodology and agreed upon metrics to stick to those top 3 or 5. But what if your CMO is overly focused on conversion metrics, like expecting the content will be measurable in terms of new customer acquisition when the social media channels and blogs are not actually optimized for conversion or last touch conversion? So how do you sell the importance of the metrics that you know matter most?
That's a very interesting question. And I would have a question back for Irene. And that question would be, is the CMO right? This oftentimes boils down to the type of business, right? So like example, animals is a good example. We created a lot of content on animals. The amount of traffic that content generates doesn't really matter because we need, when I was there, we needed 2 or 3 customers a month. That's plenty because it's an agency. So these are high dollar contracts. It's very different if you're a self-serve SaaS application and you need hundreds or thousands of trials every month to drive the business forward. So I have definitely come across situations where, a content team wants to do content things and a CMO is saying, we don't really need that. Like, we want 3 big contracts every month. So actually, like, we need you to focus on these things that aren't going to drive any traffic, but are going to support our sales team. So that's one way this plays out. The other way it plays out is that you're 100% right and your CMO is wrong. There's so much there. That's not going to be fixed overnight. We actually have a course for pro members called How to Talk to Your CMO, like a peer or something like that. And a lot of it actually comes down to the things you do in your reporting. So the things that we talked about like crafting that narrative, rallying people around the vision, that's something you do once a month in your report, but it's also something you end up having to do pretty much every single day in your Slack messages, in your meetings, in the agendas you put together, and the emails you sent. Like you're kind of always harping on the same couple of messages. Occasionally, and I've seen this too, there just comes a time when you have to like sit down with your CMO and be like, look, I don't agree with you, and here's why, and like really make your case. And if you have a good CMO, or it's a VP or a head of content or whoever it is that you end up reporting to, if they're good, they're going to sit there and they're going to listen, and you guys can have a friendly, intelligent conversation about like, why do you think one thing and why do I think the other thing? So I guess it depends. Like that's not a clear answer necessarily, but one of the things that comes up in our Slack community, it's among like the top like 3 things that comes up regularly is like, my manager doesn't get this. How do I convince them? That happens so frequently. And I would say it's like 50-50. Half the time the manager is right. And actually it's the person's perspective that kind of needs like a slight shift. And the other half of the time, the manager is just like way off base and you're totally right. There's just so many details that end up affecting how that actually plays out. So I wish I could give like a really clean answer, but that's the best I've got.
I think that's great. Makes a lot of sense and rolls into actually our next question from Rocco, which is, what's a good argument to make for quality over quantity with a CMO in terms of business benefits? Kind of is that same ballpark, I think.
That's a good question. Hey, Rocco. I'm assuming this is the Rocco that I know. How do you make the argument for quality over quantity? I think you could probably make a pretty data-driven argument. So let's say, hopefully you can use your own website as an example for this. Go into Google Analytics, look at traffic over the past like couple of years and then sort everything in order of like most amount of traffic to least amount of traffic. And what you're probably going to find is that like a handful of articles, like, 5 articles are driving a huge, maybe more than that, but it's probably like a Pareto thing. It's like 20% of the articles drive 80% of the traffic, which means that 80% of the articles are doing like almost nothing. Um, you could assign a dollar amount to each of those posts that did nothing, and then present a number that says we wasted $200,000 making these articles. And if we had just spent a little more time, on the quality, and not, I think you can achieve quality in less time than a senior manager might think too. Like even just a couple extra days to get that piece looking really good makes a huge difference. So you could say, you don't need to go from 10 articles a month to 1, but you might be able to go from 10 articles a month to 6 and significantly increase your quality. But I would say lay it out in dollars and cents, because that's gonna like click a little bit more for people. And I wouldn't go as far as being like the average blog post, cost this much and it is worth this. Like you're gonna go down a rabbit hole that's gonna be very difficult to get back out of. Yeah, but paint it like that. Like you don't have to make drastic changes to really significantly increase the quality of the work.
Nice. Yes, that makes so much sense. I love the idea of assigning a dollar amount to the blog post to kind of show that relation. And then this is really related to analyzing content. And so our next question is from Matea. Hi, Matea. Thoughts about Google Data Studio? I didn't hear it mentioned, and now I'm wondering if I'm using the wrong reporting tool.
Okay, Google Data Studio is great. There's a lot of other tools like that. Periscope or Looker, or, there's lots of tools that are really good. The question for me is, can you use the tool to do everything you need it to do? Can you get everything out of it without asking anyone else for help? That's the biggest reason I like spreadsheets, is because the average person can do everything they need to do without asking for help. It's like when you bump into that thing where it's like, I don't know how to write this SQL code to do this thing. Then you're like, or regex or whatever the thing is, it's going to becomes really difficult. Like once you start relying on other people to do that for you, you lose that little bit of control. So now if your company is pretty invested in Looker, Data Studio, whatever, learn how to use it, because those tools are really super powerful, and you're going to end up being able to do all the same things you can do in a spreadsheet. You'll learn some things in the process. Like, I think all content marketers should be really handy in a spreadsheet. If you're among the few who can write SQL, that's awesome. Like good for you, do it. But just don't let it become a barrier to doing the work you need to do.
Oh, yes, I love that. Use the tools that you were able to understand to maximize. That's great.
Yeah. That's a great point.
Yes.
It's like removing the dependencies.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Content marketers bump into a lot of dependencies because we as a group are not very technical.
Yeah.
So it's like, you want to A/B test copy, you want a new landing page, you need a new call to action pop-up thing, like you need to change the color of this thing, like, and we bump into this so frequently. And from a design and development perspective, like fine, like that's just the way it goes. But like from a reporting perspective, like not fine. It's like it's on us to be able to do that work.
Yes. When you're pinging, product teams to make like polls for you,
right?
Then
you're losing momentum in your own reporting. Those are like minutes and hours that you're like, oh, I'm ready to write this, but I don't have it at my fingertips, and then the fire totally goes out as you wait. Yeah. So our next question is from Sini, and we are going to share this recording so you can binge watch it with your team. We're super stoked that you want to binge watch it with your team. And the question is for Jimmy, do you factor in community engagement into your reporting?
Great question. I run a community, so I should have a good answer to this.
Totally.
Community engagement. I do. So this business I am in today, it's just me. It is largely based on this Slack community that we run. I do report on the engagement every month, but to be completely honest, have fallen a little bit into the trap of like reporting on a few too many things. I'm looking at like weekly posts, daily active users, total growth, whatever, like, or total membership growth, and kind of a few other things. It's become a little too much. Like it doesn't mean what it used to mean when I was first getting started and wanted like a very close look at everything that's happening. So nowadays, I'm much more interested in that like anecdotal bit, like the screenshots of people engaging. I think it is worth, like, I guess I hate to keep saying like it depends, but it does kind of depend. Like,
That's
if
our motto for the webinar.
yeah, if you're running, so, okay, so you have a software product and you've started a community, like say you have a productivity app and now you've started a community where people come and talk about productivity. I think the trap that you risk falling into is expecting that you're going to see similar traffic and conversion numbers that from a community that you would see from a blog.
Mhm.
And so you're going to have to like totally reset your expectations. People, if they're on your actual website and, the article is surrounded by calls to action and your logo and about us and careers and all these things, like it's not impossible to imagine that they say, oh, this is cool, I'll check it out. Versus if someone's in a Facebook group or a Slack group and they're surrounded by a bunch of other things that don't have anything to do with your company, engagement in and of itself is actually fantastic. And so I would say, yes, it's worth measuring. Like, again, though, pick one or two things. Maybe it's like, weekly active users or something like that. Or like the percentage of new users that's remain active for more than 90 days or that kind of thing. But try to be careful about saying like the community drove this much traffic to the site or the community sent us this many users, because that's going to be, I worry that you might sort of set yourself up for failure because the numbers are probably not going to be that attractive.
Yeah, it depends. And I feel like the anecdotal reporting or Superpath Art Museum, right, I think is sort of a good like foray into that. That's just like, hey, people are loving this, right? And I guess if you're putting a really heavy emphasis into community marketing, then ironing it out with your team, right? It's like, what's important, what's not important, what are we looking for? And maybe more of like I feel like a daily active, like a monthly active to daily active user ratio is like a better measure than like absolute like number growth or something like that.
Yeah, totally. One other thing you should do, assuming you have a landing page where people go to sign up for this, go ask your community for testimonials to put on that page, because you'll like a bunch of people will say nice things all at the same time. And then you have lots of screenshots to use. You can put them on that landing page and you can put them in your report.
I love that. The double duty. And our next question is coming from Twitter, actually sourced before the webinar. Sima was wondering, what do we do if leadership is comparing our organic reports to competitors with bigger teams who have been doing this for much longer? So thinking of a team of one against, we're just starting the project versus a team of 3 to 4 people who've been working on it for years. Even if growing traffic at an average of 25% a month, it's still quite some time.
Really good.
Wow.
Okay. A few things. First, I'm sorry you're in that situation. That's very frustrating. It's very frustrating to, it doesn't really matter what your competitors are doing. So it's very frustrating to be compared to a competitor when like you don't really understand the inner workings of like what is going on over there. You go to Crunchbase and see how much money they've raised. That'll probably tell you a lot about what's going. Like, it just means they can hire more people, spend more money on agencies and contractors. Like budget helps a lot. And so if you don't have it and you're a team of one, you're facing some very different constraints, and you kind of have to like level set those expectations accordingly. So I'm trying to think how I'd actually go about doing that. Like, one might be like, outlining a strategy for a shorter period of time, like outlining your strategy in maybe like 3-month increments instead of like the normal like 6 to 12 months, so that leadership has a good understanding of the work that you're actually doing. And then you can kind of do your best, at least, to set the expectations for how much work and what results you think you could reasonably accomplish within that period of time, and if they say, that's not good enough, say, then give me budget to do better. Like, you know what I mean? Like, the answer is not you like working yourself to death. The answer is like you getting the help that you need. Like, there's a funny anecdote in Joey Chan's Onboarding Joey series, which if you haven't seen it, go check it out. She's the head of content at 360 Learning. They did this whole like docuseries on her first couple of months there. And one of the things that happened was she got there and they had this conversation about like, okay, we expect you to create, so many articles a month. And she was like, great, how much money do I have? And they were like, oh no, like we want you to create them. And she was like, are you insane? No, I can't do that and create the strategy and do the reporting and collaborate with product and sales and da da da. And so they had this kind of like tense conversation, and they ultimately figured out like, oh yeah, that's completely unrealistic that you could do all these things and be heads down writing all day long, which is what it would have taken to get that done. So like, just sort of like thinking through your day to day, presenting that kind of plan of attack to your leadership team and saying like, this is what I can reasonably accomplish. This is like my putting my best foot forward, like my most strategic foot, like highest leverage foot forward possible. Like, now let's have a conversation. Don't put downward pressure on yourself to just be like cranking out content all the time, because that ends up being a race to the bottom.
Yes, a lot of harbored resentment, I think, in those cases. It's good to set your own boundaries and expectations. So we'll do just about 2 more questions or so. We are getting to time. And so the next one is going to be from Guy Finley. So this was awesome information. Thanks. Thank you, Guy. We specialize in doing work for SMBs. Do you see any differences in your content marketing reporting to a client / CEO, especially when they're hyper-focused on sales and maybe not even convinced about the value of content marketing?
Oh, interesting.
Fun.
That's interesting. So this is like an agency client thing.
Yeah.
The agency client reporting, that's like a whole new kind of element to this. Agency reporting is in many ways more complicated because you have kind of greater expectations. Like often what happens is like the customer gives you money and says like, just make it happen. Like do your magic, you know what I mean? And then so when you come back with all this like nuance and stuff, they're like, I don't care. Like get us an ROI for our money. So I would say this is, well, a couple things. I would say reporting is equally important, whether it's gigantic enterprise or SMB. Like it's the same thing. Like are there differences in how you might go about it? Sure. But like crafting the narrative, names and faces, like nuance, like all those things are going to be the same. If they're not sold on content, like that's kind of a different problem. And again, I would say take a quick look at the business model, because there's quite a few businesses out there that don't. I mean, I'm like imagining like some of the largest companies in the world. They didn't get there because they were great at content marketing. They got there for other reasons. And so if their business doesn't really require an enormous amount of content marketing, then maybe they're right to just be so focused on sales. And actually that's like what should be guiding your work as well. But if you are looking at their business saying like, okay, they're doing okay on sales, but like content would really help this business, I would put together like a brief strategy, like outline a vision that they could really get excited about. Tell them how long you think it'll take to run a good pilot, how much money it would cost to do it, what you expect to happen within that, like say 90 days, and call it an experiment. And, if it's an agency client thing, like it's probably going to be your job to prove it out to them. Like if you can't prove it in action, then they do have the right to say like, I don't want this. We could probably do a whole nother course on just like reporting for agencies, because there are so many other things going on, especially if you have multiple stakeholders. Like most agencies end up working with like, they have like a day-to-day team on the client side they work with, and there's a manager that's like occasionally involved, and then sort of beyond them is the reader or customer that you're actually trying to reach, who doesn't have a voice at that table. So it's kind of a whole other thing. But I would say stick to the basics, good reporting matters all the time, and then craft that narrative and rally people around it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Owning your narrative and being your own champion. That's really the resounding, like, I think, note from learning all of this. So we'll go one more question. So cool. Rexley is asking, for the most part, the reports I've created were month to month, but new stakeholders have actually asked for a year-over-year comparison instead because of off-base metrics due to COVID. Basically, we're comparing our metrics to pre-COVID metrics from 2019. Is that a valid comparison, or is it still better to show off month-over-month reporting despite the COVID-based metrics? I have to say, I love this question. I think every single industry, if you're writing content, you care about this very interesting 2020 year of stats and what to do with it.
Yeah, that's such an interesting question. I feel like always do the month-to-month. Always do that. Even if you don't have to present it to anyone, like keep your spreadsheet, put your numbers into it, collect your screenshots, like do all those things, because if at some point somebody says, hey, how's content been going for the last 6 months? Like you want an answer to that if it's between these like big year-over-year things. Is it worth checking, year-over-year stuff, especially in light of COVID? Like, is it worth checking? Definitely. Like but the caveat I would say is like the numbers are going to matter less, and the learnings that you pull from it are going to matter more, right? So like, it's likely that your business either did really well over the last year because you have a tool that like enables remote teams to collaborate and you're crushing it, or your business got decimated for a couple months because, whatever, nobody needed widget A, B, or C that you sell. So, if you look at your numbers and they're just a disaster, like this is like, COVID is like the outlier of outliers. Like I don't know what else to pull from that data. Now you could go in and see like, what did work this year? You know what I mean? Like what were the things that actually were effective? Like pull lessons from that. Like what did you try that just totally fell flat? If it fell flat, maybe it was because people were distracted with COVID, but maybe it was a bad strategy. You know what I mean? Like maybe it was like you just totally missed the mark on the tone or the voice, or maybe you distributed it in the wrong place, or maybe you overreacted. Like a lot of companies did this. Like they very quickly reacted to everything happening with COVID, did a whole bunch of things that a few months later didn't work or mean anything anymore. So like I would say, is it worth doing? Sure. But like use it as an experience to kind of like reflect on the work that you did, what worked, what didn't. Because a lot of the things that you'll pull from that, I think will be helpful going forward, hopefully without COVID as a factor.
Oh, Jimmy, that was amazing. So amazing that we actually have 11 more questions that we didn't get to. It's fine, which is fine.
Send them to me. I'll do a Loom video and I'll record answers if people want them.
You are too kind. We will send them to you, but also for everybody in chat, make sure to follow Jimmy on Twitter. Mm-hmm. He is obviously amazing when it comes to everything related to content. Mm-hmm. And the Superpath community, completely free, right? 3,000-ish amazing content marketers. It's a Slack channel. Mm-hmm. I recommend that you join because these kinds of discussions, they're happening all the time.
Yes.
And whether Jimmy answers it or Shannon or I answer it, you're going to get a lot of good value out of that. So definitely recommend that. For everybody that RSVP'd on the webinar, after the talk, we will go track down the 360 learning video that Jimmy just recommended, and then we'll also get that sample report from Jimmy to have the kind of
framework.
The framework example. Or the ideal example after the call. Well, thanks again, Jimmy. This was amazing. Yeah, that
was fun. Bernard, Shannon, always good to chat with you both. And thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to chat.
Of course.
Totally.
Of course. Yeah. All right.
Well, thank you everyone for tuning in.
Take care, y'all.
Take care.